The night it all came crashing down began like any other Tuesday evening. I got home from work, exhausted, but ready to sink into the comfort of my home. Instead, I walked into a nightmare I never saw coming. My wife, Sarah, was unusually chipper, her laugh echoing through the kitchen as she texted on her phone. She barely acknowledged me, just a quick glance and a tight-lipped, "Hey, Jack," before turning back to whatever was so fascinating on her screen. Something about her mood gnawed at me. It wasn't her usual laughter, the kind that used to light up my world. It was different, forced, almost performative. I shook off the thought and kissed her cheek, but she barely flinched, mumbling something about being too busy with work. Dinner was awkward. Her phone buzzed constantly, and every time it did, she jumped like a guilty kid caught sneaking candy. She'd turn the screen away from me, her smile stretching unnaturally as she quickly typed back. "Work stuff," she said with a dismissive wave when I finally asked. That's when the first ping of suspicion hit me. But it wasn't until later that night when things spiraled. I was in bed, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, waiting for Sarah to join me. But she didn't. She stayed downstairs, giggling softly on the couch like she was talking to an old friend, or someone more than that. Curiosity got the best of me. I tiptoed down the stairs, careful not to make a sound. The light from her phone illuminated her face, but it wasn't her expression that made my chest tighten. It was the words I could just barely make out on the screen. "Miss you already, babe." The air left my lungs like I'd been sucker punched. I froze, gripping the railing as my mind raced. Who was she talking to? What the hell was going on? Sarah must have sensed my presence because she turned around suddenly, her face a mask of panic. "Jack," she said, her voice unnaturally high. "You scared me. What are you doing sneaking around? Who are you texting?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She blinked, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then came the lies, smooth and practiced. "Oh, just Rebecca. You know how she gets when she's upset, needs to vent about her boyfriend." She waved her hand dismissively, like the entire conversation was beneath us. I wanted to believe her. God, I needed to believe her. But something about her tone, the way she clutched her phone like it held the keys to the universe, told me this wasn't Rebecca. "Let me see your phone," I said, my voice eerily calm. Her eyes widened, and she clutched the device tighter. "Jack, don't be ridiculous. It's private. Rebecca would kill me if I showed you her messages." She was lying. I knew it. And the realization hit me like a freight train. This woman, the one I'd built my life with, was hiding something. Something big. "Sarah," I said, stepping closer. "Hand me the phone." Instead of complying, she did the unthinkable, she bolted. She darted past me, clutching her phone like it was a winning lottery ticket. I stood there for a moment, stunned, before the anger took over. I followed her into the kitchen, where she was furiously deleting messages, her fingers flying over the screen. "What the hell are you doing?" I roared, slamming my hand on the counter. She jumped, her face pale. "You're being insane, Jack. What is wrong with you? What's wrong with me?" I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. "You're hiding something, Sarah. Who were you texting? Who's babe?" She hesitated for a split second, long enough for me to see the truth in her eyes. And then, like the coward she was, she doubled down. "You're paranoid," she snapped, her voice dripping with venom. "God, Jack, you're so insecure. Do you think I have time for someone else with my job? Grow up." Her words were like gasoline on a fire. I snatched her phone from her hand before she could react and scrolled through the messages she hadn't managed to delete yet. And there it was. The truth. Messages from a number saved as Mike, work, but there was nothing work-related about them. You're the best part of my day. Can't wait to see you again, beautiful. Last night was incredible. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process the betrayal. This wasn't just a fling, it was an affair. And from the looks of it, a long one. Sarah tried to snatch the phone back, but I held it out of her reach. Who the hell is Mike? I demanded, my voice a dangerous growl. Her mask slipped then, just for a moment. I saw fear, guilt, and something else, contempt. Jack, you're overreacting, she said, crossing her arms defensively. Mike is just a friend. You're making this into something it's not. Friends don't call each other beautiful, Sarah. I yelled, my voice cracking with fury. Friends don't talk about last night being incredible. Her response was as cold as it was cruel. Well, maybe if you weren't so boring, I wouldn't need someone else to make me feel alive. It was like a knife to the gut. And just like that, the woman I thought I knew became a stranger. Her words hit me like a sledgehammer. Boring? Was that what she thought of me, of our marriage? I stood there, staring at Sarah, my grip tightening around her phone as her words echoed in my head. I wanted to scream, to shout, to throw something, but all I could manage was a single, shaky question. How long, Sarah? She scoffed, rolling her eyes like I was the one acting out of line. Oh, don't give me that wounded puppy look, Jack. Maybe if you paid attention to me for once, you'd notice how unhappy I've been. Unhappy? I repeated, my voice rising. I work my ass off to give you everything, Sarah. I've been here, trying to build a life with you, and this is how you repay me? Her face hardened, the guilt I'd seen moments earlier replaced by something colder, resentment. Spare me the martyr act, Jack. You're never here. You come home, sit on that couch like a lump, and expect me to worship you for paying the bills. Meanwhile, I'm dying inside, and you don't even notice. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, your solution is to jump into someone else's arms? To lie to me? To betray me? She shrugged, as if my anger was an overreaction. You were never going to change, Jack. At least Mike listens to me. Mike, I spat, the name like poison in my mouth. Let me guess, he's married too? Or does he just prey on vulnerable women who want to feel alive? She smirked, and that smirk pushed me dangerously close to the edge. You don't know anything about him, so don't even try. He's twice the man you'll ever be. That was it. Something inside me snapped. I wasn't thinking straight, I wasn't thinking at all. All I knew was that I needed answers. I stormed past her, phone still in hand, scrolling furiously through the messages for any clue about where this Mike worked, lived, anything. Sarah chased after me, screaming, "Give me my phone, Jack. You have no right." No right? I barked, spinning around to face her. You lost your right to privacy the second you started lying to me. Then I saw it, a message with an address. A coffee shop downtown, timestamp just a few hours earlier. Is this where you meet him? I asked, holding up the phone. Her face went pale, and for the first time, she was at a loss for words. That was all the confirmation I needed. Without another word, I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Jack, wait, she yelled, panic creeping into her voice. Where are you going? To meet the man who thinks he's twice the man I'll ever be, I shot back, slamming the door behind me. The drive to the coffee shop was a blur. My mind was racing, a toxic mix of fury and adrenaline propelling me forward. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, I felt like a powder keg ready to explode. I scanned the place through the windows, looking for anyone who matched the picture I'd painted of Mike in my head, a smug, arrogant bastard who thought he could steal my wife and get away with it. And then I saw him. He was sitting in the corner, casually sipping a latte like he didn't have a care in the world. Late 30s, slicked back hair, expensive suit, he looked like the kind of guy who thought he could charm his way out of anything. I didn't wait to think it through. I stormed into the shop, the bell above the door jangling loudly as I marched straight toward him. "Mike," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. He looked up, startled at first, but quickly recovered, flashing me a smile that made my blood boil. "You must be Jack," he said, leaning back in his chair like this was some kind of business meeting. "Get up," I growled. "Jack," he said calmly, raising his hands in mock surrender. "I think we should talk about this like adults." I didn't let him finish. I grabbed him by the collar and yanked him to his feet. The coffee shop erupted into gasps and whispers, but I didn't care. "You think you can just waltz into my life and take what's mine?" I snarled, my face inches from his. "Jack, stop." Sarah's voice rang out behind me. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, out of breath and panicked. "Perfect timing," I said, shoving Mike back into his chair. "Now you can both explain to me what the hell you've been doing behind my back." "Jack, you're making a scene," Sarah hissed, glancing nervously at the crowd forming around us. "I don't care," I shot back. "I want answers, Sarah. How long has this been going on? How long have you been lying to me?" Mike tried to interject, but I silenced him with a glare. "Don't even think about it," I warned. Sarah crossed her arms, her defiance returning. "You want answers, Jack? Fine. We've been seeing each other for 6 months. And you know what? I don't regret it. He treats me better than you ever did." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I felt my fists clench, but I forced myself to stay calm. "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. "You throw away 10 years of marriage for this piece of trash?" "Maybe I wouldn't have if you'd been half the man he is," she snapped. And that was it. The last straw. Without thinking, I grabbed Mike by the collar again and dragged him outside, ignoring his protests and Sarah's frantic shouts. By the time we were in the parking lot, I didn't care about anything except making him pay. The cold night air hit my face as I shoved Mike into the parking lot. He stumbled, his expensive shoes scuffing against the concrete. Sarah's voice rang out behind me, high-pitched and desperate, but I didn't turn around. My entire focus was on him, the man who had the audacity to wreck my life and sit there sipping coffee like he was untouchable. "Jack, stop!" Sarah yelled as she followed me outside. "This isn't going to solve anything." But I wasn't listening. My fists clenched at my sides as I squared up to Mike, who was straightening his suit jacket, trying to save face. "Look, man," he said, holding up his hands like some peace-loving diplomat. "I get that you're upset. But let's be rational about this." "Rational?" I barked, stepping closer. "You've been screwing my wife, lying to me, and I'm supposed to be rational?" He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, my fist connected with his jaw. The impact reverberated up my arm, and he stumbled backward, hitting the side of a parked car with a dull thud. "Jack, stop it!" Sarah screamed, rushing forward. She tried to grab my arm, but I shook her off. "You don't get to tell me to stop," I snarled, turning to her. "Not after what you've done." Mike groaned, rubbing his jaw as he pushed himself off the car. "You're insane," he spat, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "You think this is going to fix anything? She came to me because you're a failure of a husband." The words hit harder than any punch, and for a split second, I froze. That's when he made his move, lunging at me with surprising speed. We crashed to the ground, a chaotic tangle of fists and elbows. I didn't care about the pain, I just wanted to make him suffer. My fist found his ribs, his stomach, his face. Each blow felt like a release, years of frustration and betrayal pouring out of me. But then I felt hands grabbing at me again, pulling me off him. It was Sarah, screaming and crying, her nails digging into my arms. "Stop it, Jack. You're going to kill him. Maybe he deserves it," I shouted, shoving her away. Mike scrambled to his feet, his face bloodied and his suit a mess. "You're both insane," he muttered, wiping his mouth. "She's not worth it, man." The way he said it, so smug, so dismissive, sent me over the edge. But before I could charge at him again, the sound of sirens pierced the air. I froze, looking around as the red and blue lights flashed in the distance. Someone inside the coffee shop must have called the cops. "Great," Sarah muttered, her face pale. "Just great. This is exactly what we needed." "Don't you dare act like this is my fault," I snapped. Mike was already backing away, holding his hands up. "I'm done with this circus," he said. "Good luck with your train wreck of a marriage." And just like that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there with bloodied knuckles and a raging storm in my chest. The police showed up moments later, 2 officers stepping out of their cruiser with cautious expressions. "What's going on here?" one of them asked, looking between me, Sarah, and the retreating figure of Mike. "He attacked him," Sarah blurted out, pointing at me. I stared at her, stunned. "Are you serious right now?" She avoided my gaze, crossing her arms. "I told you to stop, Jack. You didn't listen." The officers exchanged glances, and one of them stepped closer to me. "Sir, can you explain what happened here?" I wanted to tell them everything, to pour out the truth about the affair, the betrayal, the sheer audacity of it all. But standing there, under the harsh glow of the parking lot lights, I realized how pathetic it would sound. "My wife's been cheating on me," I said finally, my voice hollow. "And that guy? He's the one she's been doing it with." The officers looked at Sarah, who flushed but didn't deny it. "That doesn't justify assault," she said quietly, her tone full of disdain. "Unbelievable," I muttered, shaking my head. The officer sighed, pulling out a notepad. "Look, we can settle this without taking anyone in. But you're lucky no one's pressing charges. Go home, both of you." The drive home was silent, the tension between us thick enough to choke on. Sarah stared out the window, her arms crossed tightly. When we pulled into the driveway, she finally broke the silence. "That was completely out of line, Jack." "Out of line?" I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You cheat on me, lie to me, humiliate me, and I'm out of line?" "You embarrassed me," she snapped, her voice cold. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" "Humiliating for you?" I said, my voice rising again. "You don't even care what you've done to me, do you? To us?" She rolled her eyes, stepping out of the car and slamming the door. "I'm not doing this with you tonight, Jack." I followed her inside, my anger bubbling over. "You don't get to walk away from this, Sarah. Not after everything you've done." She spun around, her face twisted with anger. "You want to know the truth, Jack? I haven't loved you in years. And Mike? At least he makes me feel like I matter." Her words left me speechless, the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. She stormed upstairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her, leaving me standing in the empty living room, staring at the shattered pieces of my life. The house was eerily quiet after Sarah stormed upstairs, her angry footsteps echoing before the bedroom door slammed shut. I stood there in the living room, motionless, feeling the weight of her words press down on me like a suffocating blanket. "I haven't loved you in years." That sentence replayed in my head over and over, each repetition stabbing deeper into my chest. How had I missed this? Was I so blind, so naive, that I didn't notice my wife had already checked out of our marriage? I sat down on the couch, the same couch she'd mocked me for sitting on after work every day, and stared at the dark TV screen. My reflection stared back, blood still smeared on my knuckles from my earlier fight with Mike. My hands trembled as the adrenaline drained out of my system, leaving only exhaustion and emptiness in its wake. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. The next morning, I woke up on that same couch, my neck stiff and my mind foggy. The house was dead silent, and for a moment, I thought Sarah had left. But then I heard the faint clinking of dishes from the kitchen. I dragged myself off the couch, my body protesting every movement, and walked into the kitchen. There she was, standing by the sink, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. She didn't even acknowledge me as I entered. "Morning," I said, my voice hoarse. She didn't respond. "Sarah, we need to talk," I said, leaning against the counter. She turned to face me, her expression icy. "Talk about what, Jack? About how you embarrassed me in front of a coffee shop full of people? Or about how you nearly got yourself arrested last night? Don't you dare make this about me," I snapped, my temper flaring again. "You're the one who's been lying and sneaking around for months. You've been cheating on me, Sarah. Or have you already forgotten that part?" She set her mug down on the counter with a loud clink and crossed her arms. "What do you want me to say, Jack? That I'm sorry? Because I'm not. I've spent years in this marriage feeling invisible, and I'm done apologizing for trying to find a little happiness for myself." Her words hit like a punch to the gut, but this time, I didn't let her see how much they hurt. "Happiness?" I said bitterly. "You think this, sneaking around with some sleazy corporate clown, is happiness?" She shrugged, her indifference cutting deeper than any insult. "It's better than being stuck in this miserable cycle with you." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the tension crackling in the air, like a storm waiting to explode. "I want you out," I said finally, my voice low but firm. She raised an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said. "Pack your things and go. You've made it clear you don't want this marriage, so there's no point in dragging it out any longer." She stared at me for a moment, her expression unreadable, before letting out a dry laugh. "Oh, you think you're kicking me out? That's cute, Jack. But this is my house too, and I'm not going anywhere." "Then I'll leave," I said, the words tumbling out before I even had time to think them through. Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, so now you're the martyr? Running away because you can't handle the truth?" "I'm not running away," I shot back. "I'm removing myself from this toxic mess you've created. But don't think for a second that you're getting off scot-free. I'm talking to a lawyer first thing Monday morning." Her face darkened at that, a flicker of worry breaking through her composure. "A lawyer? Don't be ridiculous, Jack. There's no need to bring lawyers into this." "Of course there is," I said. "You've already made it clear where your priorities lie. I'm not about to let you take me for a ride while you play house with your new boyfriend." She opened her mouth to argue, but before she could say anything, the sound of her phone buzzing on the counter cut her off. She glanced at it, and I saw her expression shift, guilt, panic, something she couldn't hide fast enough. "Who is it?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "It's none of your business," she said, grabbing the phone and turning away from me. But I wasn't about to let her brush me off again. I reached out, snatching the phone from her hand before she could react. "Jack, give it back," she shouted, lunging for it. I held it out of her reach, scrolling through the messages as my stomach churned. And there it was, another message from Mike. "Mike, last night was insane. Can't stop thinking about you. Let me know when you're free again." I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with anger. "You're still talking to him? After everything?" She didn't deny it. Instead, she crossed her arms and glared at me. "What do you expect, Jack? For me to cut him off because you had a tantrum in a parking lot?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The sheer audacity of her words left me speechless. "You're unbelievable," I said finally, tossing her phone onto the counter. "I don't even know who you are anymore." "Maybe you never did," she said coldly, grabbing her phone and walking out of the kitchen. As the door slammed shut behind her, I realized that this wasn't just the end of our marriage, it was the end of the life I thought we'd built together. And as much as it hurt, there was a small, flickering part of me that felt something else: relief. I sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the wooden surface. The quiet of the house felt suffocating, every second dragging like an eternity. Sarah had holed herself up in the bedroom after our latest blowout, leaving me to stew in my anger and confusion. My knuckles were still sore from hitting Mike, but it was the emotional wounds that throbbed the hardest. I reached for my phone and dialed my best friend, Eric. He was the kind of guy who didn't mince words, a former Marine turned small business owner. If anyone could offer perspective, it was him. "Jack," he answered after 2 rings, his voice gruff but familiar. "What's going on, man? You sound like crap." I didn't sugarcoat it. "Sarah's been cheating on me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Come again?" "You heard me," I said, gripping the edge of the table. "She's been sleeping with some guy named Mike. Corporate hotshot type. I found out last night." Eric let out a low whistle. "Jesus, Jack. I always thought something was off with her. You need me to come over?" "No," I said quickly. I don't know what to do." "She's not sorry, Eric. She doesn't even care that she's ripping me apart." "Well, first things first," he said. "Don't let her play you. Get your ducks in a row, lawyer up, protect your finances, all that. And for God's sake, don't let her make you feel like this is your fault." "She's already trying," I admitted. "Blaming me for not making her happy, saying I'm the reason she strayed." "That's bull," Eric snapped. "She's just trying to justify her garbage behavior. Don't fall for it." That afternoon, I took Eric's advice and called a lawyer. The woman I spoke to, Michelle Carter, was sharp, no nonsense, and exactly what I needed. "Mr. Harper," she said after I explained the situation, "it's important to remain calm and strategic. Emotional decisions can lead to costly mistakes." "Calm?" I echoed, laughing bitterly. "That's easier said than done." "I understand," she said. "But if your wife is already showing this level of disrespect, you need to focus on protecting yourself. Do you share bank accounts? Property?" I gave her the rundown of our finances, and by the end of the call, I felt a small measure of control returning. It wasn't much, but it was something to hold on to. That night, Sarah emerged from the bedroom while I was eating dinner. She looked disheveled, her usual air of superiority replaced by something almost vulnerable. "We need to talk," she said, sitting across from me. I put down my fork and leaned back in my chair. "Talk? Sure. Let's talk about how you've been sneaking around with Mike, lying to my face, and then blaming me for it." She sighed heavily, as if she were the one burdened by all of this. "Jack, I don't want this to turn into a war." "A war?" I repeated, incredulous. "Sarah, you declared war the second you decided to cheat." "I'm trying to be reasonable here," she said, her voice tight. "We've both made mistakes, but we need to figure out how to move forward." "Move forward?" I scoffed. "You mean sweep this under the rug and pretend it didn't happen?" Her eyes narrowed. "You can't keep punishing me for this, Jack. If you want to leave, fine. But if you're staying, you need to let it go." "Unbelievable," I muttered, shaking my head. "You really think you're the victim in this, don't you?" "I'm not the only one at fault here," she shot back. "You've been emotionally checked out for years, Jack. Always working late, always distracted. Do you even know the last time we really connected?" Her words struck a nerve, but I wasn't about to let her rewrite history. "Don't you dare put this on me," I said, my voice rising. "You could have talked to me, Sarah. You could have said something instead of running to Mike." She looked away, her jaw tightening. "You wouldn't have listened. Then you should have left," I snapped. "If you were so miserable, why didn't you just leave?" Her silence was deafening. The next day, I decided to clear my head by going for a drive. As I pulled out of the driveway, I noticed Sarah's car was missing. I didn't think much of it until I stopped at a gas station and saw something that made my blood run cold. Sarah's car was parked behind the building, hidden from the main road. And there, standing beside it, was Mike. I watched as they talked, their body language familiar and intimate. She laughed at something he said, her hand brushing his arm. The rage I'd been holding back erupted like a volcano. I parked my car and got out, my heart pounding. They didn't see me coming until I was right in front of them. "Jack?" Sarah said, her eyes wide with shock. Mike took a step back, raising his hands defensively. "Look, man, this isn't what it looks like." "Oh, really?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because it looks exactly like what I think it is." Sarah stepped between us, her expression panicked. "Jack, calm down. We were just talking." "Talking?" I said, laughing bitterly. "Do you really think I'm that stupid?" Mike opened his mouth to say something, but I didn't give him the chance. I grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the side of Sarah's car. "You're done," I growled, my face inches from his. "Stay the hell away from my wife, or I swear to God, I'll make you regret it." "Jack, stop it!" Sarah shouted, trying to pull me away. I let go of Mike, who stumbled back, coughing and clutching his chest. "You're pathetic," I said to Sarah, my voice cold. "Both of you." And with that, I walked away, leaving them standing there, stunned and speechless. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing with anger and betrayal. I knew things couldn't go on like this. Something had to change, and it had to change now. The silence in the car on the drive home felt deafening, the roar of my anger only matched by the ache in my chest. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind reeled with what I had just witnessed, Sarah, laughing with Mike, acting like I didn't exist, like we didn't exist. I pulled into the driveway and just sat there, staring at the house. It looked so ordinary, so deceptively peaceful. But inside, it was a battlefield, and I was done playing the wounded soldier. When I walked through the front door, Sarah was already there. She must have rushed back after our encounter at the gas station. She stood in the living room, arms crossed, her expression a mix of defiance and guilt. "Jack," she started, her tone laced with fake calmness, "we need to talk." "No," I said firmly, slamming the door behind me. "We don't need to talk. You need to listen." Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, so now you're the one making demands? After acting like a maniac at the gas station?" I stepped closer, the tension between us crackling like a live wire. "A maniac? You think my reaction was uncalled for? After everything you've done?" Sarah rolled her eyes and let out an exasperated sigh. "God, Jack, you're so dramatic. It was just a conversation. You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Blowing it out of proportion?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You've been sneaking around with Mike for months, and you have the audacity to stand here and act like I'm the problem?" She threw her hands in the air. "You know what your problem is, Jack? You can't handle reality. You can't handle the fact that this marriage has been dead for years. Dead because you killed it." I shouted, my voice echoing through the house. "You lied, you cheated, and now you're trying to justify it by blaming me? You're unbelievable, Sarah." Her face twisted into a scowl. "And you're pathetic. Do you even hear yourself? Acting like some self-righteous victim. Maybe if you'd been half the man Mike is, we wouldn't be in this mess. That was it, the final straw. Her words hit me like a freight train, but instead of breaking me, they ignited something inside me. Half the man Mike is? I said, laughing bitterly. You mean the same Mike who cowered like a little boy when I confronted him? The same Mike who only looks good to you because he's a shiny distraction from the mess you've made of your own life? Her face flushed with anger, but I didn't give her a chance to respond. You know what, Sarah? I'm done. Done trying to fix this, done trying to understand you, and done letting you drag me down with you. She stared at me, her expression hardening. Fine. If you're so done, then leave. Go ahead, Jack. Walk away like you always do. Her words stung, but I refused to let her see it. Oh, I'm leaving, I said. But not before making sure you don't get to waltz away from this unscathed. Her brow furrowed in confusion. What's that supposed to mean? You'll see, I said coldly, heading upstairs to pack a bag. As I shoved clothes into a duffel bag, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Eric. You okay, man? He asked. No, I admitted, zipping up the bag. But I'm about to make things right. What's the plan? Lawyers already lined up, I said. But first, I'm exposing her for the lying, cheating snake she is. Eric chuckled. Now that's the Jack I know. Need any help? I've got it, I said. But thanks. When I hung up, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. For too long, I had let Sarah control the narrative, twist the truth, and manipulate me into doubting myself. That ended now. The next morning, I paid a visit to Sarah's workplace. It was a bold move, and I knew it could backfire, but I didn't care. I was past the point of playing nice. I walked into the sleek office building, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. At the front desk, a young receptionist gave me a polite smile. Hi, can I help you? Yeah, I said. I'm here to see Mike Henderson. It's urgent. Her smile faltered slightly, but she nodded. One moment, please. As she made the call, I noticed several employees glancing at me curiously. Good. Let them watch. A few minutes later, Mike appeared in the lobby, looking as smug as ever. But his confidence wavered when he saw me standing there. Jack, he said cautiously. What are you doing here? Just tying up loose ends, I said, my voice calm but laced with menace. Before he could respond, I turned to the employees who had gathered nearby. I'd like you all to know, I said loudly, that this man has been sleeping with my wife. Gasps and whispers rippled through the room as Mike's face turned beet red. Jack, stop, he said, his voice low and panicked. Why? I said, glaring at him. Embarrassed? You weren't embarrassed when you were sneaking around with Sarah, were you? Security, someone called, but I didn't care. I had made my point. As I walked out of the building, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. It didn't erase the pain, but it was a step toward reclaiming my dignity. Back home, Sarah was waiting for me, her face pale and her eyes wide with anger. What did you do? She demanded. I told the truth, I said simply. You had no right. No, Sarah, I interrupted. You had no right. No right to lie to me, to betray me, to destroy our marriage. I'm done protecting you, and I'm done letting you walk all over me. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time, she looked truly shaken. And for the first time, I felt free. The morning after my public takedown of Mike at his workplace, the ripple effect started spreading fast. It was like dropping a bomb and watching the debris scatter. My phone buzzed non-stop with messages from Sarah, alternating between threats, pleas, and half-hearted justifications. But I was done playing her game. I ignored her texts and calls, shutting down her attempts to manipulate me further. My focus was now on securing my future, not salvaging the wreckage of a marriage she had set ablaze. At work, Eric pulled me into his office. "Dude, you're making waves. You know that, right?" I shrugged, leaning against his desk. "Let them crash. I've got nothing to hide." Eric grinned, shaking his head. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But don't lose sight of the big picture. You still need to come out of this intact." "Don't worry," I said. "I've got a plan." The next shock came that afternoon, in the form of an unexpected knock at the door. When I opened it, I found Mike standing there, looking equal parts furious and desperate. His face was still bruised from our last encounter, and he carried himself with the tension of a man who had been backed into a corner. "What the hell do you want?" I asked, crossing my arms. "We need to talk," he said through gritted teeth. "Oh, now you want to talk?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Didn't seem too eager for a conversation when you were sneaking around with my wife." He stepped closer, his jaw tightening. "Look, I get it. You're pissed. But you're destroying my life, Jack. My job's on the line, and my wife." He trailed off, his face falling as he mentioned her. "Wait," I said, raising an eyebrow. "You're married?" Mike's silence was all the confirmation I needed. I let out a bitter laugh. "Wow. Just when I thought you couldn't sink any lower." He held up a hand, as if trying to calm me down. "I'm not here to fight. I just need you to back off, okay? Whatever issues you have with Sarah, take it up with her. Leave me out of it." "Leave you out of it?" I repeated, stepping closer. "You made yourself part of it the moment you decided to screw around with a married woman. So, no, Mike. I won't be backing off." His face twisted in frustration. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said, cutting him off. "You're a coward who thought he could have his cake and eat it too. Well, guess what? Actions have consequences." Before he could respond, I slammed the door in his face, leaving him standing on the porch, looking defeated. Later that evening, Sarah finally showed her face at the house. She walked in without knocking, as if she still had some claim to the place. "We need to talk," she said, her tone sharp. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "I'm not interested in anything you have to say, Sarah." "Well, you're going to listen anyway," she snapped, crossing her arms. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Mike's wife found out about the affair because of you. She's threatening to leave him." I stared at her, incredulous. "And that's supposed to make me feel bad? You and Mike ruined your own lives. Don't pin this on me." She let out a bitter laugh. "You think you're some kind of hero, don't you? Exposing us like that. But all you've done is prove how petty and vindictive you are." I stood up, towering over her. "No, Sarah. What I've done is show you that you can't just walk all over people and expect to get away with it. You made your choices, and now you're dealing with the fallout." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the woman I had fallen in love with, the fiery, passionate person who used to fight for what she believed in. But that woman was long gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. "You think this is over," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "It's over when I say it's over," I replied, my tone just as cold. The next day, I met with my lawyer, Michelle, to finalize the divorce proceedings. She went through the details with clinical precision, her no-nonsense attitude a stark contrast to the chaos of my personal life. "Based on the evidence you've provided," she said, glancing at the photos and texts I had given her, "you're in a strong position. The infidelity clause in your prenup is clear, and the court will likely favor you." Her words were a small comfort, but they didn't erase the pain of the situation. As I left her office, I received a text from Sarah. It was short and cryptic: "We need to meet. It's important." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a coffee shop later that afternoon, the neutral setting a stark contrast to the storm brewing between us. "I want to make a deal," she said, skipping the pleasantries. I raised an eyebrow. "A deal?" She nodded, her expression unreadable. "We end this quietly. No dragging each other through the mud, no public drama. In exchange, I won't fight you on the prenup." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. "And what do you get out of this?" "Dignity," she said simply. I laughed, shaking my head. "Dignity? Sarah, that ship sailed a long time ago." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You can be as bitter as you want, Jack, but think about this logically. A clean break is better for both of us." I considered her words, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to refuse, to drag her through the same hell she had put me through. But another part of me, the part that was tired of the endless fighting, saw the value in her offer. "Fine," I said finally. "But don't think for a second that this lets you off the hook. You'll have to live with what you've done, Sarah. And so will I." Her expression softened for a moment, but she quickly masked it with her usual bravado. "Deal," she said, extending her hand. I shook it, sealing the agreement that would finally bring this nightmare to an end. I didn't sleep that night, even though the deal with Sarah was supposed to bring some kind of closure. Instead, I found myself lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. Her lies, her betrayal, the smugness of Mike, the pain of it all. But in the quiet of that night, something shifted inside me. I realized that while the marriage was over, my life wasn't. I still had choices to make, a future to carve out, and I wasn't going to let Sarah, or anyone else, define it for me. The next morning, I packed the rest of my things. Clothes, books, some sentimental items, even the framed photo from our honeymoon in Hawaii, though I took it more as a reminder of what was, rather than what still could be. It was strange, packing up years of a life into a couple of suitcases, but it also felt like shedding dead weight. Sarah didn't try to stop me when I left. She was sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone like it was just another day. When I passed by with my bags, she barely looked up. "Goodbye, Sarah," I said. She glanced at me, her face unreadable. "Goodbye, Jack." And that was it. No tears, no last-minute attempts to salvage what couldn't be saved. Just two people who had once promised each other the world, now reduced to strangers. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom with scuffed floors and an old kitchen, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I felt a strange kind of peace. I threw myself into work, took up running to clear my head, and reconnected with old friends I had neglected during my marriage. Eric became my sounding board, always ready with a beer and some unsolicited advice. "You're better off, man," he said one night as we sat on his porch. "Sarah was a nightmare. You just didn't see it because you loved her." "Yeah," I said, taking a sip of my beer. "Love blinds you. Makes you ignore the red flags until it's too late." He nodded, then smirked. "Well, now you've got a clean slate. What's next for Jack?" I shrugged, the question both exciting and terrifying. "I don't know. But I think that's okay." A month later, I got a call from Sarah. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity got the better of me. "Jack," she said, her voice hesitant. "I just wanted to let you know that the divorce papers came through. It's official." "Okay," I said, keeping my tone neutral. There was a pause, and then she said, "I'm sorry. For everything." Her words caught me off guard, but I didn't let it show. "I appreciate that," I said simply. I know I can't undo what I did, she continued. But I hope you find happiness. You deserve it. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind her of all the pain she had caused. But another part of me, the part that was tired of holding on to anger, chose to let it go. Thanks, Sarah, I said finally. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, too. We hung up, and just like that, the final thread between us was cut. A few weeks later, I found myself at a coffee shop, not far from my new apartment. I was reading a book when a woman approached me, asking if the seat across from me was taken. She had a warm smile and kind eyes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a spark. We started talking, and before I knew it, hours had passed. Her name was Emily, and she had her own story of heartbreak and resilience. We didn't exchange numbers that day, but we agreed to meet at the same coffee shop the following week. As I walked home that evening, I felt lighter, as if the weight of the past had finally lifted. Looking back now, I can see the lessons in the chaos. Betrayal is a brutal teacher, but it forces you to see things clearly. I learned to trust my instincts, to value my worth, and to never settle for less than I deserve. If you're reading this and you're in the thick of it, wondering how you'll ever move on, I'll tell you this, you will. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight, but there's life beyond the pain. And when you finally step into that life, you'll realize that the end of one chapter is just the beginning of another. For me, the end of Sarah wasn't the end of my story. It was just the start of something better.